Hello and welcome, my friend. I am Neon from Terranash, where bedtime stories are a haven for tired minds and restless hearts. Take a moment before we start tonight's story to really stop and connect with yourself. First, find a place that feels safe and comfortable. Perhaps your bed, all wrapped up in the warmth of your blankets. Or maybe a chair in which you can lean back and let go. Move around until your body is supported, until you feel the ability to let go completely. Now, focus on your breath. Breathe in slowly and deeply, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Hold it for just a moment, and then exhale softly, imagining the weight of the day slipping away with each breath. With each breath in, bring calmness into your body. With each breath out, let go anything that no longer serves you. Let your body begin to relax. Feel your shoulders dropping, your arms becoming heavy, and your legs settling into stillness. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, in rhythm with your breath, steady and soothing, carrying you down to even greater ease. Let your thoughts slow down, like leaves floating gently on a quiet stream. Imagine yourself in a peaceful setting. Maybe you're standing at sunrise atop a mountain, surrounded by crisp air and endless skies. Or perhaps you're in a cozy room with a crackling fire, the soft light flickering all around you. Wherever that little bit of imagination takes you, feel calm and serenity. It's all yours, a place where no one can disturb the serenity of your peace. Now, as the story begins, let its words take you even deeper into relaxation. Each phrase is like a soft lullaby, bringing you closer and closer to stillness. There's no rush, no pressures. It's just the gentle unwinding of a tale as it weaves itself through your mind, preparing you for rest. Let go completely and allow the story to carry you toward a night of peaceful sleep. Sylas had always preferred solitude. His greenhouse, tucked away at the edge of a sprawling meadow, was a sanctuary filled with rare and peculiar plants he had collected over the years. Nights often passed quietly, with the soft rustle of leaves and the faint drip of condensation forming a comforting symphony. But on this particular evening, something felt different. Sylas sat at his workbench, meticulously recording the growth patterns of a vibrant orchid from the Andes, when a peculiar sound caught his attention. A light tapping, like the hesitant knock of an old friend. He turned toward the window. The rain had come suddenly, unannounced. But this was no ordinary rain. The droplets shimmered as they struck the glass, each one leaving behind a faint, fleeting glow. As Sylas rose and opened the window, a breeze carried in a fragrance unlike any he had ever encountered. It was earthy, yes, but also sweet, as if mingled with the perfume of unseen blossoms and the freshness of untouched soil. "Strange," Sylas murmured, leaning out to feel the mist against his skin. The scent seemed to grow stronger, compelling him to step outside. The meadow, usually blanketed in golden grasses and wildflowers, now glistened as though jeweled. The rain fell in a peculiar pattern, forming a faint, silvery trail that stretched across the landscape, leading toward the dense woods that bordered his property. Sylas hesitated, glancing back at the warm glow of his greenhouse. The idea of venturing out in the rain was uncharacteristic, yet the pull was undeniable. Grabbing his lantern and a weathered cloak, he stepped into the damp night. The rain was unlike any he had experienced. Each drop that touched him felt alive, as if imparting a gentle energy. The trail shimmered brighter as he followed it, weaving through the meadow with a deliberate grace, guiding him like an unspoken invitation. When he reached the edge of the woods, the rain seemed to intensify, yet Sylas felt no discomfort. Instead, a strange warmth suffused the air. The trees ahead stood dark and foreboding, their branches tangled in intricate patterns that seemed to form a gate. Beyond them lay a mystery that Sylas could neither name nor ignore. Lantern in hand, he crossed the threshold, the light casting golden pools on the forest floor. The rain softened, its rhythm becoming a gentle whisper that seemed to echo through the trees. "Where are you leading me?" he asked aloud, his voice swallowed by the quiet hum of the forest. No answer came, but the silver trail continued deeper into the woods, gleaming like a ribbon under the lantern's glow. The forest was unlike anything Sylas had seen, though he had wandered these woods many times before. The trees here were ancient, their trunks impossibly wide and their roots coiling like sleeping serpents. Moss coated every surface, glowing faintly under the lantern's light, and small, luminous insects flitted through the air like living sparks. The rain seemed to fade as Sylas walked further, its silvery trail growing more vivid on the forest floor. It wasn't just leading him, it was guiding him, curving gently as if to ensure he did not stray. After what felt like hours, Sylas came to a clearing. Here, the rain stopped entirely, and the air grew thick with a perfume so intoxicating he had to pause and steady himself. In the center of the clearing stood an archway made entirely of vines. It was enormous, towering above him and stretching wide enough to encompass the path. The vines were thick and braided, their surface shimmering with a faint iridescence. Flowers bloomed along the arch, their petals shifting colors in a slow, hypnotic dance. Deep violet one moment, fiery orange the next, and a tranquil blue after that. Sylas approached cautiously. As he drew near, he noticed that the ground beneath the arch was unlike the rest of the forest floor. It glimmered as if dusted with crushed gemstones, and the air within the archway seemed alive, swirling with faint motes of light. He reached out to touch the nearest vine. Its surface was warm and smooth, pulsing faintly beneath his fingertips. A soft hum vibrated through him, as if the arch itself were alive and breathing. "Is this a door?" he wondered aloud, his voice barely a whisper. The hum grew louder in response, not threatening, but inviting, as if to say, "Yes, and it is open for you." Sylas hesitated. A part of him, the rational part, urged him to turn back, This was no place for a botanist, no matter how curious. But another part of him, the one that had spent a lifetime searching for the extraordinary in the world of plants, could not resist. Taking a deep breath, Sylas stepped through the archway. The moment he crossed, the world shifted. The forest, the rain, even the distant sounds of the night faded away. He found himself standing in a garden unlike anything he could have imagined. It stretched endlessly, a landscape of colors so vivid they seemed to hum with life. Flowers of every shape and size swayed gently, though there was no breeze. Trees with crystalline leaves cast dappled patterns on the ground, and streams of liquid light wound through the landscape like molten gold. Sylas stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The garden was impossibly vast, impossibly beautiful, and impossibly still. And then, just as he was beginning to comprehend its scale, a faint voice whispered through the air, soft and melodic. "Welcome, traveler. The garden has been waiting for you." Sylas stood in awe, the voice still echoing faintly in his ears. The garden stretched infinitely, a dreamscape of colors and textures he couldn't begin to name. Flowers, ferns, and trees grew in ways that defied nature, their forms weaving together like a symphony of life. The air was warm and rich, carrying not just the scent of plants, but the feeling of ancient secrets waiting to be uncovered. Drawn forward, Sylas noticed a cluster of plants just ahead. They resembled ferns, but glimmered as though spun from silver thread. The fronds were delicate and luminous, swaying gently even though the air was still. They seemed almost alive, as if aware of his presence. Curiosity overtook him. Kneeling down, Sylas reached out, his fingertips grazing the surface of a frond. It was softer than any plant he'd ever touched, and as he held it, a faint vibration traveled up his hand. Suddenly, a soft, melodic voice filled the air, not with words spoken aloud, but with thoughts that appeared in his mind, vivid and undeniable. "We are the watchers of time," the voice began, serene and measured, "from a world where twilight never turned to night. We whispered to travelers, guiding them through paths long lost, so they could find their way home." Sylas blinked, stunned. The words felt ancient and full of meaning, as though they carried more than their simple message. His hand trembled slightly as he released the frond, but the voice lingered. Images began to form in his mind, visions of another world, bathed in an endless golden dusk. In that place, the ferns grew tall, their silver fronds reflecting the soft light like mirrors. People walked among them, listening, guided by the gentle swaying of the plants. When the vision faded, Sylas sat back on his heels, his heart pounding. He looked at the ferns, their movements now calm and still. It was as if they had shared all they could, and now they rested. He stayed there for a moment, absorbing what he had experienced. "Stories in the leaves," he murmured, his voice barely audible. The idea was incredible, yet he couldn't deny what had just happened. The plants here, were alive in ways he had never imagined, each holding memories of worlds that no longer existed, or perhaps had never existed at all. Rising to his feet, Sylas gazed deeper into the garden. If this single plant could share such wonders, what other stories might the garden hold? His curiosity burned brighter than ever as he stepped forward, the faint hum of unseen life surrounding him like a song. As Sylas wandered deeper, the landscape began to change. The colors grew richer, the plants more vibrant. The air was thick with scents, jasmine, honey, and something else he couldn't identify. A sweetness that seemed to wrap around him like a warm embrace. In the distance, he spotted something gleaming. Intrigued, he quickened his pace, weaving through clusters of strange and beautiful flora. When he reached the source of the glow, he froze in astonishment. Before him was a circular pool of golden liquid, its surface shimmering like molten sunlight. The pool radiated warmth, though the air around it remained cool. Surrounding it were flowers unlike any Sylas had ever seen, delicate cups of coral, amber, and pale gold, their petals translucent and glowing softly. Kneeling by the edge, Sylas peered into the pool. The liquid was perfectly still, yet its surface rippled faintly, as though stirred by an invisible hand. His reflection stared back at him, but it seemed different. His features appeared softer, more peaceful, and his eyes glimmered with a light that wasn't his own. Fascinated, Sylas reached for one of the flowers near the pool. As his fingers brushed its petals, a new voice emerged, bright and musical, like the chiming of tiny bells. "We are the tears of dawn," it said, light and lilting, born in a land of eternal night. Our nectar brought the first sunrise, painting the world in colors no one had ever seen. Drink, and you will see through the eyes of the morning. Sylas hesitated. The words were poetic, but there was a weight to them, a sense of profound truth. He touched the flower again, and a single bead of nectar appeared at the tip of its petal, gleaming like liquid gold. Cautiously, Sylas dipped his finger into the droplet and brought it to his lips. The nectar was warm and sweet, like sunlight distilled into liquid form. As it spread across his tongue, a sensation rushed through him, a wave of light and clarity. The world around him seemed to transform. Colors grew impossibly vivid, each plant alive with a presence he hadn't felt before. He could see the faint glow of energy flowing through every leaf, every petal, as if the entire garden breathed in unison. The golden pool shimmered brighter, and he realized its ripples were not random. They moved in patterns, forming fleeting images of a world shrouded in darkness, then bathed in radiant dawn. Sylas felt tears prick his eyes. The beauty of the vision was overwhelming. The story of these flowers so profound that it left him breathless. When the images faded, he found himself kneeling by the pool, his hand resting gently on the flower he had touched. "Thank you," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if the flowers could hear him. He stood slowly, gazing once more at the golden pool and its glowing blossoms. Though the vision had passed, the light it had awakened within him lingered. Carrying the warmth of the dawn in his heart, Sylas turned and continued deeper into the garden, eager to uncover the next chapter of its story. As Sylas ventured further into the garden, the air began to hum with an almost imperceptible energy. It was as if the ground beneath his feet vibrated with the heartbeat of an unseen presence. The foliage around him thickened, forming a natural corridor that led to an open clearing. At its center stood a tree so immense it seemed to hold up the sky. The tree's bark was a deep, velvety indigo, its surface streaked with veins of silver that shimmered faintly. Its branches stretched wide, adorned with crystalline leaves that caught the soft light of the garden and refracted it into rainbows. The tree seemed ancient, older than any living thing Sylas had ever encountered, yet it radiated vitality, as though it had always been and would always be. Sylas approached cautiously, drawn by the strange vibration in the air. The closer he came, the stronger the hum grew, resonating deep within his chest. He placed a tentative hand against the bark, and the vibrations seemed to shift, attuning to his touch. As soon as his palm connected with the tree, a voice emerged, not in words, but in waves of feeling and memory that flooded his mind. "I am the keeper of memories," the voice intoned, low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. "My roots drink from the wells of forgotten worlds, and my branches carry the stories of all who have wandered here. Rest beneath my shade, and I will share with you the dreams of those who came before." Sylas lowered himself to the ground, leaning against the tree's massive trunk. Its bark was cool and smooth, grounding him in a way he couldn't explain. As he closed his eyes, the world around him seemed to fade, replaced by visions more vivid than any dream. He saw a vast desert, its sands glowing under a sky filled with 3 suns. There, a people clad in flowing silver robes gathered beneath another tree, one that mirrored the keeper of memories. They sang in a language Sylas couldn't understand, their voices weaving a melody that seemed to echo across time. The vision shifted. He was underwater now, in a sea of liquid sapphire. Gigantic blooms swayed with the currents, their petals shimmering like mother of pearl. Strange creatures, luminous and graceful, wove between the flowers, each leaving trails of light in its wake. The final vision was of a world shrouded in fog, where mountains floated weightlessly in the sky. On the largest mountain, a solitary figure stood at the edge of a cliff, cloaked in a garment made of woven starlight. They held a small glowing orb in their hands, cradling it like something sacred. The orb pulsed faintly, and as the figure raised it toward the heavens, the fog parted, revealing a sea of stars so close, Sylas felt as though he could touch them. As the visions faded, Sylas opened his eyes, finding himself once more beneath the vast indigo tree. The hum of its energy had softened to a gentle vibration, steady and grounding. He exhaled deeply, his heart still racing from the intensity of what he had seen. "The dreams of those who came before," Sylas murmured. the tree's words echoing in his mind. He looked up at its crystalline leaves, which sparkled like constellations. Somewhere in its vast network of branches, it held the stories of countless worlds, each as wondrous and strange as the ones he had glimpsed. He stayed beneath the tree a while longer, letting its calming energy wash over him. When he finally rose to his feet, he placed a hand on the bark once more. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice reverent. The tree's vibrations shifted in response, as if acknowledging his gratitude. Sylas walked away, feeling as though he carried a piece of those forgotten worlds within him. The garden began to change again as night descended. The sky above, though hidden by the dense canopy of trees, darkened to a deep indigo. Stars seemed to peek through gaps in the foliage, their light soft and ethereal. Sylas noticed tiny glimmers in the distance, dancing through the air like fireflies. Drawn by their soft glow, he moved toward them, winding through clusters of strange, glowing mushrooms and grasses that whispered as he passed. When he reached the source of the light, he found himself surrounded by flowers unlike any he had ever seen. They floated freely, untethered to the ground, their translucent petals glowing faintly in shades of gold, lavender, and pale green. The flowers bobbed gently, as if carried by an invisible current. Sylas reached for one, and it drifted into his hand, its petals warm and silky. As he held it, a voice spoke, this time high and childlike, filled with wonder. "We are the light weavers," it said, its tone soft and bright. "We come from a world where stars were born in our petals. In the dark of endless night, we guided the lost, lighting paths hidden to all but those who believed." As the flower spoke, Sylas felt a warmth spread through him, gentle but profound, like the comfort of a long-forgotten memory. Images began to form in his mind, a vast black expanse lit only by the soft glow of the light weavers. Their petals shimmered with starlight, forming constellations that guided travelers through the darkness. He saw weary figures wandering across desolate landscapes, their faces lighting up with hope as they followed the luminous flowers. The vision dissolved, leaving Sylas with a deep sense of calm. He looked at the flower in his hand, its glow pulsing faintly as if breathing. Gently, he released it, and it floated back into the air, joining the others as they drifted lazily through the garden. The floating flowers surrounded him, their soft light illuminating his path as he moved forward. He felt a sense of peace, as though the garden itself was embracing him, guiding him towards something greater. In the distance, he saw a faint golden glow, brighter than the flowers, but just as inviting. It seemed to beckon him onward, promising new wonders yet to be discovered. With the warmth of the light weavers still filling his heart, Sylas followed the light, ready to hear the next story the garden had to tell. The golden glow led Sylas to the edge of a vast river, but this was no ordinary waterway. The river's surface shimmered as if made of liquid starlight, its currents flowing in slow, deliberate waves that seemed to ripple through both space and time. Above it, faint tendrils of mist curled upward, catching the light and forming ethereal shapes that danced briefly before vanishing. Sylas knelt at the bank, his reflection distorted and fragmented in the luminous current. The air here was heavier, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle. He dipped a hand into the river, expecting warmth, but the liquid was cool, refreshing, and unlike anything he had ever touched. It seemed to seep into him, leaving a strange, vibrant sensation in its wake. As he pulled his hand back, droplets clung to his fingers, each one glowing softly before evaporating into the air. For a moment, all was silent, but then the river began to hum, a low, resonant tone that seemed to originate from deep within its depths. "We are the river of stars," a voice intoned, deep and ancient, like the echo of distant galaxies. "We carry the essence of forgotten skies, the memories of constellations long since fallen. Drink from us, and you will see the stories etched in the heavens." Sylas hesitated. He had already experienced so much in the garden, and each revelation had left him awed but humbled. Yet, the river's invitation was irresistible. Cupping his hands, he scooped a small portion of the shimmering liquid and brought it to his lips. The taste was indescribable, a blend of cool night air, the sharpness of ozone, and the sweetness of distant rain. As the liquid flowed through him, the world around him dissolved, replaced by an expanse of infinite stars. He was no longer standing by the river. He floated weightlessly in a sea of light, surrounded by constellations that burned with impossible brilliance. Each star pulsed with energy, and as Sylas focused on them, they began to unravel, revealing their secrets. He saw a civilization that had built cities on floating islands, their towers reaching toward a sky perpetually ablaze with auroras. He saw a nomadic people who traveled between the stars on ships woven from strands of pure light, their songs echoing across the cosmos. He saw the birth of a galaxy, its spirals spinning outward in a cascade of color and creation. The visions faded slowly, leaving Sylas breathless and filled with wonder. He found himself back at the riverbank, the cool air grounding him once more. The river's glow had softened, as if it too were resting after sharing its secrets. Sylas sat by the river for a long time, staring at the shimmering surface. He felt both small and expansive, as though he carried the weight of countless skies within him. When he finally rose, he whispered his thanks to the river and continued his journey, the light of stars still glowing faintly in his heart. The path from the river led Sylas into a grove unlike any he had encountered before. The trees here were slender and tall, their bark a pale silver that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their leaves were small and delicate, catching even the slightest movement of air and creating a sound like the soft chime of bells. As Sylas walked, the chiming grew more rhythmic, almost melodic. He paused, straining to listen, and realized the trees were not merely rustling, they were singing. Each note was clear and pure, weaving together into a harmony that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the garden. He stepped closer to one of the trees, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. The melody changed subtly as his fingers brushed the bark, as though the tree were responding to him. "We are the singing grove," a voice sang, light and crystalline. "Our roots are entwined with the song of creation. We remember the first breath of the world, when sound became life and life became song. Touch us, and you will hear the echoes of the first melody." Sylas closed his eyes, his hands resting gently on the tree's trunk. The grove's melody deepened, and suddenly he was no longer standing among the trees. He was in a vast, open expanse filled with light and sound. Waves of music swirled around him, each note alive and vibrant, forming shapes that danced and shimmered like living beings. He saw a world being born from the sound. Mountains rising with deep, rumbling tones, rivers carving their paths with soft, flowing melodies, and forests blooming with bursts of bright, joyous notes. The air itself seemed alive with song, every breath carrying the essence of creation. The vision shifted, and he saw beings formed entirely of sound, their bodies shimmering with translucent light. They moved gracefully, their forms dissolving and reforming with each note they sang. They turned toward him, their voices blending into a single, resonant tone that filled him with a sense of profound peace. When the vision faded, Sylas opened his eyes to find the grove still singing softly around him. He felt tears on his cheeks, though he wasn't sure when he had started crying. The music had touched something deep within him, something he couldn't put into words. He lingered in the grove, letting its melody soothe him before finally moving on. The path ahead seemed to glow faintly, as though lit by the music's lingering resonance. Sylas walked with a lighter heart, carrying the song of creation with him as he ventured deeper into the garden's mysteries. As Sylas left the singing grove, the garden seemed to shift again. The air grew cooler, and the path beneath his feet turned from soft moss to a surface that felt like smooth glass. He walked cautiously, glancing around as the vibrant greenery gave way to a circular clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a shallow pool, its surface impossibly still. Surrounding the pool were 4 great arches, each intricately carved with patterns that seemed to represent a different season. One arch bore delicate engravings of snowflakes and icicles, another of blooming flowers and winding vines. The third was adorned with golden leaves, and the last glimmered with symbols of summer, sunbursts, waves, and ripened fruit. The pool itself shone like polished silver, reflecting the entire clearing in perfect clarity. As Sylas approached, he noticed that the reflection in the water was not of his present surroundings. Instead, it showed a dense winter forest blanketed in snow, the air shimmering with icy light. Curious, Sylas knelt by the pool, peering into the wintry scene. The moment his fingers brushed the water's surface, the clearing vanished. He was no longer in the garden, but standing in the forest he had glimpsed, snow crunching softly beneath his boots. "We are the mirror of seasons," a voice echoed around him, soft and wistful. We hold the memory of all cycles, the endless dance of time. Each season tells its story, and in their reflection, you will find your place within the rhythm of the world. The snow-laden trees seemed to shiver, their branches trembling as the wind carried whispers of a forgotten tale. Sylas saw flashes of a world frozen in eternal winter, its people huddled around glowing hearths, crafting stories and songs to keep their hearts warm. The scene shifted, and the snow melted into a riot of color as spring bloomed. He watched as flowers burst forth from the thawing earth, their petals opening to greet the sun. The visions continued, the golden abundance of summer, where fields swayed with ripe grain and laughter filled the air. The quiet beauty of autumn, where leaves fell in fiery cascades, carrying with them the bittersweet song of endings. As the seasons cycled before him, Sylas felt a deep connection to their rhythm. He realized that each season held a reflection of life itself, beginnings, growth, harvest, and rest. The vision ended, and he found himself once more by the pool. This time, the reflection was of his own face, serene and illuminated by a soft inner light. "Thank you," Sylas whispered, understanding now that he was part of something vast and eternal. He rose, the quiet wisdom of the seasons settling in his heart, and stepped through one of the arches. The final path led Sylas to the heart of the garden, where all its stories seemed to converge. The air here was thick with the hum of unseen energy, and the light grew softer, wrapping him in a gentle glow. At the center of this sacred space stood a single, magnificent bloom. The flower was enormous, its petals shimmering with every color Sylas had seen in the garden. It pulsed faintly, as though alive with the essence of every story the garden had shared. As Sylas approached, the flower opened fully, revealing a brilliant core of light. From it came a voice unlike any he had heard before, layered and infinite, as if every voice he had encountered in the garden now spoke as one. "You have walked our paths, listened to our stories, and carried our memories. The garden beyond the rain holds many secrets, but its greatest gift is the choice it offers. Will you remain with us to nurture the stories and become part of our eternal song? Or will you return to your world, carrying our essence to sow seeds of wonder in the hearts of others?" Sylas's heart raced. The idea of staying was tempting. He had found peace and beauty here unlike anything he had ever known. But he also felt the weight of his journey. The garden's stories were not meant to be locked away. They were meant to be shared, to inspire, to remind others of the infinite worlds that lay beyond their reach. Sylas began, his voice faltering. He looked around at the garden, its beauty almost overwhelming, and then back at the luminous flower. Finally, he spoke, his words steady and filled with conviction. "I will return. Your stories deserve to live beyond this place, to remind others of the magic and wonder they've forgotten. The garden seemed to hum in approval, the light from the flower growing brighter. The voice spoke again, this time soft and full of gratitude. Then go, keeper of stories. Carry the light of the garden with you, and know that you will always have a home here. The flower's light enveloped him, and Sylas felt a rush of warmth and motion. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in his workshop, the rain still tapping against the windows. In his hands, he held a single luminous petal, its colors shifting like sunlight through stained glass. Sylas smiled, his heart full. The garden's stories were now his to share, and though he was no longer among its wonders, he knew it would live on, in his words, his work, and the hearts of those who listened. And as the rain faded into the distance, Sylas began to write, the garden's light shining softly beside him.